Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to start a great panel. We are not live streaming, I just learned, but we record this and it will be not cut, but then put on the internet. So be careful what you say. We are on, right? This is not something where we have Chatham House or something. So I would like to welcome you wherever you are at the moment to a great panel with a wonderful list of speakers that I have here with me to discussing something that is all over in the green zone and the blue zone on the discussions on the interface of industry and policymakers this week, as it was at New York Climate Week, as it was at London Climate Week this week. I think one of the 2 or 3 topics of the year, and that is powering the digital age. It's basically the question, how do we really deal with this incredible energy demand on the one side, the demand for infrastructure, the demand for managing those, and using AI on the same time to adopt better and learn how to use AI to make energy more efficient and the infrastructure coming upon with it. And I have a great panel. I'm starting next to me with Rana Ghoneim from the running the energy department at UNIDO. UNIDO, as we all know, is the player in this game, having a lot of impact globally on thinking, structuring, and influencing our thinking in this digital age of digital transformation. Next to Rana, I have Vijay, Karia, the CEO of OptiCloud, truly an inspiring leader in this space, award-winning entrepreneur in the AI and for good space. And next to Vijay, I have David. I want to pronounce it correctly, David. I only want me to make, don't take it. David Gonahasa. Oh, David Gonahasa. It's a pleasure to meet you, David Gonahasa. The team lead industry 4.0 in the government of Uganda. As we all know, we have a situation that the old European countries like Germany are not leading on all this. We are not leading on this, and we learn a lot from our friends in the economic cooperation all over in Africa and Asia, and sometimes even coming to my 5th panelist, Adam Elman, the Director of Sustainability EMEA at Google, sometimes even from the UK, sometimes, right, Adam? That's really something where we look at with a lot of interest from the old European member states of the European Union. So without further ado, I would like to open it up. And maybe, Rana, you are from a global multilateral perspective, looking at infrastructure and digitalization with both an analytical lens, but also have a lot of contacts with investors, with infrastructure builders, with energy providers, and of course, with what we describe as a new economy of AI, which is, if we go around the boulevard in WEF this year, you could see that it was one theme only with this EY, as I said, at places like the Climate Week in London and New York, and now here COP, it's one of the 2 or 3 top themes. What's your take on the sustainable industrial development globally with regard particularly to the challenge that AI means for infrastructure and energy?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure, also because the room here sounds a lot nicer. So this is really great. Perfect. That's really appreciated. No, jokes aside. So yes, UNIDO, we work on the topic of digitalization in multiple ways. And so first and foremost, we actually work with developing and emerging economies on, using artificial intelligence and digital technologies in manufacturing. But that is not really the area I will focus on because I am from the Energy and Climate Action Division, as you mentioned. And so I would rather focus on exactly this growing demand for energy in relation to the AI use. And so really one of the core things we are trying to focus on is how to help build demand for carbon-free electricity to power that growing demand for AI and digital technologies. So, governments need to put the right systems in place, policies in place to support this what we call 24/7 production of electricity from renewables that will help then in powering AI. But I think for us to scale up, so one of the core things that we've been working on as well with ITU, another sister agency within the UN system, is actually a standard that defines what this green AI means, because we need common metrics when we start looking at the carbon footprint of different technologies, and we need mechanisms and tools that help us compare apples to apples at the end of the day. And so this is really where the normative role of UNIDO comes in, to help with the development of standards on one side, but then working with governments on actually making those standards work and implemented. Another area that I find also very exciting is, it takes a long while also to get and set up projects, whether these are infrastructure projects, industrial projects, and AI here has, in my view, a good opportunity to help us leapfrog a lot of that and shorten some of these cycles for project development or even for innovation development. And, this is an area where I feel, we would love to work more with private sector, also those gathered here around the table, on creating hackathons, maybe that would help in generating ideas and solutions that especially come from the global south. And the third dimension, I would say, is probably data. And how we can use also AI to support improving data availability, especially when we talk about countries in the global south. Data is very scarce, is very difficult to obtain, and so how we can use digital systems to start with, but then the incremental value of AI in helping make data more available on the ground. So yeah, I think I'd probably stop here. So with these like three initial thoughts of like standards and policies, and then shortening gaps and like development timelines, and then the data piece.
Great intro, Rana. I will certainly come back to this. I should introduce myself. I'm running our infrastructure and climate advisory work at Deloitte globally. That's a huge field of growth for us at the moment, because we see this demand and our clients come to us to better understand. I would like to come back to the standardization question, because I come from the energy field. I've been 2 times in government running energy politics in Germany, and I think we have strong standards in the energy space, and how we apply them in this new area, in this new era and area is something, a very interesting question. I truly believe that we need strong standards in this place. Vijay, looking at cloud technologies, how do OptiCloud, tell us a little bit about OptiCloud utilizing AI and cloud technologies to really optimize and reduce emissions in the digital infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Vijay Karia here, co-founder and CEO for OptiCloud. We were the global winner for climate action from the UN from COP29. And we're using AI to be the sovereign efficiency layer on top of the AI and cloud infrastructure. So before this artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence was released, IT teams would really manually do the work to make their clouds efficient. And the challenge is the cloud has so much data. So, to run a data center, to actually see the demand that's happening in real time, this is a massive data set that's millions and millions of rows. A human can't possibly analyze that much data and make sound judgment. So, AI presents a big opportunity to actually be more efficient. And being more efficient actually means using less energy, reducing emissions, using less water, because a lot of this uses water for cooling systems, and also saving money. So what we've done is we built a platform. Think of us as a Tesla autopilot for cloud management, where we enable the IT teams to more easily identify the waste in their cloud and AI infrastructure, and use the artificial intelligent agents to actually automate the cleanup steps for that. The results lead to up to 60% savings in their actual expenses, but also 30% reduction in their emissions, lowering their energy usage, and also lowering millions of waters wasted. But we don't just stop there, because what we do is we're actually enabling a circular economy, where we take a portion of that waste and we reinvest it into biodiversity protection and protection for indigenous communities. With the targets that are set out in front of us over the next 5 years that we all have to meet in order for the health of the planet, we actually need to do better than just lowering emissions. We need to actually be proactive about protecting nature and protecting indigenous people.
May I ask, sorry, just that I get this right. The tool that you have developed is optimizing the way that clouds work with their data and thus using less tokens and thus using less energy. Is that right?
Partially. So
I'm not a techie, I'm an energy guy. So.
I mean, we coined the term digital waste because there's so many types of waste out there. But think about like in a business or government, everyone has test environments, dev environments, production environments. You might not be using a ton of these environments, but they're running. So we'll help clean that up. But also you might need your test environment only when your testers are testing, but you keep it running 48 hours. It's like leaving all the lights in your house on when you leave your house.
Now I got it. Now I got it. Took me a while, but I'm slowly. So it was really helpful. Thank you. Adam, how's Google looking at this? You're one of the giants in this industry, and you are, I mean, we read every other week how you increasingly challenged by the huge energy demand, but at the same time looking at resilient infrastructure and have very, very ambitious sustainability goals, particularly on the emission reduction. How do you manage this? I mean, I'm really interested.
Thank you for the question, and thanks for hosting this important question. Thanks for those that have made the trip over here. No, absolutely. I mean, I think we see AI as a really a great catalyst for driving climate action. And so we see this bold opportunity in terms of what AI can do. And there's been a lot of strong research out there from, for example, the IEA, Grantham Institute with Lord Stern, whose most recent insights highlight a 5 gigaton emission reduction opportunity by 2035. Far more significant than the sort of downside of impacts of data centers. So we're really excited about that, but we need to do this responsibly. We've got, as you say, big ambitious goals, net zero 2030 and a whole raft of other goals. We're very lucky that we can focus on every layer of the stack, everything down to the chips that power AI learning and inference. We call them tensor processing units. We design our own chipsets. And our most recent chip is 30 times more efficient than the original one in 2018. This is good for the planet, but has been flagged as well. Energy is one of our biggest costs. If we can be more efficient, that's good for business. Equally so with the models themselves. We try and make our models as efficient as possible. Gemini, our main sort of model, which you might have heard about, over the last 12 months, 33x improvement in energy and 44x improvement in terms of carbon. And then similarly, we focus on clean energy. We're one of the largest buyers of clean energy. We've done over 170 deals for 22 gigawatts. Last year, we did 8 gigawatts worth of new capacity, more than we've done in any other year. That's traditional wind and solar, but we're also investing in advanced geothermal, advanced nuclear, battery storage, et cetera, et cetera. And we're actually going one step further. We want to source our clean energy locally, where we operate, on the grids we operate, matched on an hourly basis. So a lot of good work in this space, which we continue to focus on. Just to put this in perspective, compared to 5 years ago, we have 6 times as much compute power per watt of energy. So we're making really good gains in terms of efficiency. But the second part of your question was the opportunity and where can AI help in this space? And in the clean energy space, we have solutions like Tapestry, which is helping the country of Chile. We've just done a big deal with PGM, the largest grid in the US. In fact, we've just announced last week a big deal with the city of Rio, allowing to do grid scale analysis, running tens of thousands of scenarios to help make grids more reliable and help them figure out how they can deploy clean energy, battery storage, all those sorts of things. Solar API uses geospatial data and AI to help solar developers deploy rooftop solar more quickly, more efficiently. We're covering 540 million buildings around the world. Similarly, helping wind developers predict wind output of their wind farm, improving efficiency by 20%. So there's a lot of use cases where AI is having an impact. And the great news is this isn't in the future. This is solutions that are being deployed and having an impact today.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, fascinating stuff. I'll come back to this in a moment because I really like to learn better how we can use the opportunity to really accelerate the transformation of our energy system, and thus coming along with this, and that's UNIDO again, the standards for the industry transformation. But first, I really would love to look at Uganda and ask David, I mean, looking both at Industry 4.0, which is a huge opportunity for your country to leapfrog the old Europe one more time, and the digital innovation in a capacity constrained, obviously capacity constrained environment. How are you managing this, and what are the main challenges and opportunities in this way?
It's kind of hard going after Google, you know, but lucky for me, I don't have to solve global problems. It's just it's just for Uganda. No, so we are in a very interesting place. We are part of a secretariat that's in the presidency that's been developed to try and figure out how do we create value from our resource availability. So for a very long time, Africa has been dependent on the global north, especially for many of the technologies and solutions that they use in country. And what we are saying is, if we have a very in-depth understanding of our challenges and what we have as available resources, what can we build? And I think, you know, going around that from the climate space, because that's something we found actually, we see a huge opportunity because a lot of the solutions coming in are still foreign owned. In fact, on the carbon market space, if you just check many of the registries, you'll find that almost 95% of the projects are registered to foreign proponents, right? And they're being paid out, you know, in foreign places, and, you know, brings back the question around impact. So we're saying, how do we use technology in Industry 4.0 to come in and begin to identify and solve some of these problems? And I'll give you an example. So biodiversity conservation for us, super important. And what we've also done is go further to identify or learn what the potential upsides could be, right? So 2 use cases. One is the second largest freshwater lake in the country, Lake Victoria, and the other is the largest mountain gorilla forest in the world. So we've decided that we want to do ground sensing to validate remote sensing data. That gives us sort of more accurate reporting on what's happening in those locations. But what we've also done is decide that we can actually manufacture the sensors, design and manufacture the sensors in country. Now, of course, that also then brings up very big challenges around connectivity. And we're looking at, yes, can we use one of the, you know, satellite companies as backhaul for local IoT networks in those areas, which we've actually built on, you know, local technologies. But it gets even more fun because we decided that we can build very focused SLMs to analyze this data and provide policy reporting. And what we see this, you know, is a pathway towards a huge market, because if this works in Uganda, it can work in many other markets. And that's a very good pathway towards a business case that we can utilize. So it's interesting, when we first formed the department, everyone thought we we're going to be building a couple of fintech apps and things, and we just completely changed the narrative and said, where's the real opportunity and can we work towards it? So in a couple of months, you may hear an announcement about an investment from the government of Uganda into a very large sensor manufacturing facility. We've already done most of the, you know, initial phases around it, but taking that and saying where the opportunity is. My colleague in the room, Alan, leads our mobility department, and we've built confidently Africa's largest, most capable e-bus manufacturing facility. Now we have the buses rolling off the line, and we're saying, fine, if we added emissions monitoring onto these buses, and the sensors can, you know, really tell, give actual information around what, how much you're, you know, eliminating from the diesel, you know, buses that you previously had. What's the opportunity? So for us, really, as a country, it's yes, look at these very big challenges and be very deliberate on the business around them and build out pathways towards that.
Super interesting. I come back to Uganda, the case study, in a moment. I have an idea about this. But Rana, let's start with what does it mean in terms of the interface of this new thing, this animal that we begin to understand, right? Sam Altman always says we are there, like 3% of what it can be the capacity of AI very soon. We don't have standards. And now I see many, you know, economic minister coming to Berlin and to Brussels and say, we offer the first place on planet Earth in India or in China, where you can build your computing capacity 100% on green energy. You know, the European Commission, under the European Commission legislation, you need to have at least 50% green electrons to run a data center. That's a regulation. I mean, it's mandatory. We are Silicon Valley of regulations in the EU. You know this. We know about regulation. But how do you develop standard for this in a global race of computing power, where also players like Google really, want to provide green tokens very soon?
Thanks for that question. And I think there's also an element in your question that's interesting when you say, okay, well, India or some of the other developing countries are ready to offer that solution, because that brings in an element as well of justice in AI that we need to think of, because maybe India or some of the larger economies in the global south can deliver that, but how will Uganda, that actually still has the energy access deficits? I mean, how do you also prioritize then electricity to support AI development when there are certain communities that still lack access to electricity? So, I mean, this is an element that for sure we need to think of. The other element of justice is also how do we support in developing the skills also that are needed, because, in Europe or in the global north, there's a lot of workforce that is already very well equipped to lead on that. But what about the youth, again, in Africa, where there's quite a lot of unemployment rates, and how do we support systems to actually deliver the skill sets that we need to develop better AI solutions and solutions of AI that support sustainable development? So I know that's not what you asked, but I felt like I need to kind of come in here, because there is this element of justice, and this is, in our interaction with a lot of the youth representatives, this is something that comes out clearly. And I mean, I personally feel like it's not every country needs to have these data centers at the end of the day, right? So we're not looking at that necessarily, but I think, designing the system early on with that and justice in mind is going to be important. And AI, again, can help us maybe, play on that. The other point is, I also noticed in the discussion, and I'm a very, very basic user of technology, I need to admit that. And yes, perfect, great. So there's IoT and there's, AI. And so there's multiple layers, and we are pulling them all in one sometimes, especially, non-experts like myself. So I would just need to also say that we need to kind of have better clarity around all of these technologies and where they also help, and what do we specifically refer to when we talk about AI. Now, on the standards piece, I would say, so last year, actually, at COP29, led by ITU, we started supporting a process for the development of a standard for green AI. And, this year, actually, as part of the action agenda, maybe you all have seen the thematic rooms along the side when we're coming here. So the Brazilian presidency has put quite a lot of emphasis on the action agenda and restructured it in a way to look at 6 axes, one of which is industry, but some are cross-cutting. And there is a whole action agenda that's trying to bring countries together towards common digital action agenda areas. And one of them, again, is actually standards, and looking at the carbon footprint also of technologies related to AI. Now, the key is putting that into a system that, like the ISO, for example, where we can have a general consensus around some of the areas. And luckily, I would say in the area of AI is not as contentious. I mean, in other industries, there may be some, unclear areas, right? I mean, maybe also for AI, but essentially, can we look, what would you consider, is green power looking at waste heat in an oil and gas company and using that actually excess heat to actually power AI? I know some countries, including some European countries, are really looking at making that case study. So does that qualify as energy efficiency? Is that something that we want to qualify as green? And these are a lot of the discussions that are happening on this standard development as what counts as green at the end of the day.
Well, I have good news for you. And again, in the Silicon Valley of regulation, the EU, the Commission is developing a plan to regulate simulate what we do with the heat that you have in data centers when you cool them. That's really some of the sector convergence and circularity commission's work that is coming out in a couple of weeks. I would like to come first to Adam back and then Vijay to you and really better understand how you think big on computing power and manage this. I mean, we heard about the SMR thing that, I mean, coming from a macro energy perspective, I mean, I'm very honestly, that will not solve the problem, right? You need much more if you want to meet the need for computing power that I learned from my last conversation with the NVIDIA guys will be huge, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it. Long term, will there be something like 2 offers that a hyperscaler would offer? One having tokens that are green and other tokens that are maybe running by coal power plants? Is that the future?
Not a future with Google, no. No, it's a great question. I think the first thing is, I think it's important to put some of this in perspective, and the IEA have done the most recent work looking at this. So looking at last year, data centers, so all data centers around the world, of which AI is a fraction of what they do, used 1.5% of global electricity. Now that is ramping up and ramping up very quickly. It's expected to double by 2030. But actually, if you look at the growth, data centers is only 1/10 of the growth. 90% of the growth is coming from industry, heating, cooling, transportation. So we're very focused on this, but I think it's important to sort of put it in perspective. On the energy side, as I say, for Google, we've been focused on clean energy for many, many years. We signed our first corporate power purchase agreement back in 2010. Since 2017, we've been buying enough clean energy on a global annual basis to match our electricity usage. But as I mentioned earlier, we don't think that's good enough, because that just means somewhere at some time you've bought clean electricity. We want to buy it locally, where on the grids where we operate, and match it on an hourly basis. We call that 24/7 carbon-free energy. And by the way, we've bought other governments and companies and other groups around the world on that journey. And we're making good progress. We're currently at 66% of our operations run on that. Now, we're very much focused on additionality. So as I mentioned before, 22 gigawatts worth of new clean energy onto the grid, predominantly focused on traditional wind and solar, and we will continue to invest in those. But we do see a real need for a broad range of energy solutions out there. So yes, we're investing in small modular nuclear reactors. We did the first corporate deal for a fleet of those, if you like, with Kairos in the US, the first of which will come online in 2030. So this is not, years and years away, and we're confident in the technology. We already have advanced geothermal powering operations in Nevada. We've done a deal in Asia. And so again, we think that's a good opportunity. We're investing in long duration, short duration storage, but also thinking about how AI can help in this space. So we have an AI solution called Carbon Intelligent Load Shifting. It does 2 things. It says, what are the compute jobs we're going to need to run tomorrow? And where do we think clean energy is going to be available around the world at certain days? And it shifts those jobs around to where energy is cleanest. And we're working with grids around the world on demand response to help support grids in terms of when they're at capacity. And if you think about the EU energy crisis a number of years ago, that was really important. So I think, along with the efficiency we mentioned earlier, and there's going to be a continued focus on that, along with putting more and more clean energy onto the grid is going to be really important. And along, as I say, with helping with technologies that are going to scale up these forms of clean energy more quickly is going to be really important, not just for data centers, as I say, for all of these other opportunities that are really important. And I think just to the point earlier, this is not just for, this is for everyone around the world. We need to democratize access to AI, access to energy, access to all of these things to everyone. So it is part of that whole agenda as well.
That's right. And I saw this digital room here in the AI space and everything. I have a different notion about this, because traveling around my colleagues and helping them to serve corporate and public sector clients in this space, I see a very strong trend towards sovereign AI infrastructure, really looking at national interests because of global uncertainties, let's describe it this way. And that's something where I see a lot of appetite, particularly in Europe and Asian countries, around the mature OECD world, to really assure that parts of their AI infrastructure are national sovereign. And but that's not our topic today. I'm just saying that with all due respect to our multilateral approach, but I'm a big multilateralist, that's something that we have to acknowledge, that there is another trend that is not playing in our cards in many other things, but also not in the AI space. Vijay, coming back to your observation, if you look 5 years ahead in the market, right, do you see that your companies like yours, really focusing on this efficiency gains in using the cloud will play a major role in also setting standards in this space? Will there be players who can afford not to look at this in the way that you do it?
Great question. And I mean, we already are actually working directly on the sustainability standards for AI. So I'm in the working groups working with a lot of the big corporations and countries on defining standards for artificial intelligence and all the processes. For us, you know, when I started our project, you know, it was from a thesis that was pretty simple. In the physical world, we have waste management. In the physical world, we have recycling. Why don't we have digital sanitation and digital recycling? You know, all of us live our virtual lives. There's about 5 billion people on Earth. Each one of those people have multiple devices. And by 2030, I've seen the estimates about 200 billion devices connected. We're going to have more devices over time with artificial intelligence in them, consuming more energy. And we need to start measuring and being able to hold ourselves accountable for the digital waste of our world. So I think that over time, you know, how I see the next 5 years is working with partners, countries. It's not something I'm going to be able to do alone. It's not something any company is going to be able to do alone. It's going to be partnership from public sector and private sector to put the standards in place. And, you know, from our standpoint, we're focused on digital waste. So, you know, over the next 5 years, there's different categories of waste that our company will be going after cleaning. And you made a very good point about the vulnerable populations, and it's our thesis as well. As AI starts expanding more and more, so does the gap between the haves and have-nots. And the reality is the have-nots are actually doing more for sustainability for the planet right now. The indigenous communities make up 5% of the population, yet protect 80% of the biodiversity on Earth. So when we started this concept of digital recycling, we were really focused on how do we clean up the waste for these corporations? How do we convert that waste into something productive for the most vulnerable populations on Earth? And we work directly with even the indigenous leaders and tribes here in Belém. The part that gets me most excited about what we're building is actually seeing obviously the business results for saving money for companies and making them more efficient, lowering their emissions, lowering their water usage. It's wonderful. But for me, the impact that it has on the populations, on the indigenous populations, I've seen it firsthand. And we can convert this waste into something productive to protect biodiversity and these communities that actually hold the traditional values of humanity. And if we lose them, we actually lose the disaster recovery plan for humanity. And I think we need, over the next 5 years, we need to make sure that we're doing as much as we can and as much as possible to protect humanity.
I love it. And now we're in the very center of the emotional COP discussion, Global South and Global North. What are the responsibilities? You know, we have tomorrow on the negotiation agenda out there, the question of financing the adaptation fund. And it's really a big question. Being a former negotiator, I'm very passionate about this. Thank you for this contribution. I would love to go back to Uganda and learn how you look at this, you know, digital divide that we never solved. I mean, I've been at digital divide discussions in the World Economic Forum for over 15 years. Every year we discuss that we have to do something. Now, with this new thing, that gives us huge opportunities, you can leapfrog parts of what you have never really come up with. Is that an opportunity that you see, and what do you need? Is it finance? Is it know-how? What do you need to really use this opportunity for a place like Uganda?
Hello. Yeah. So we have a joke in the ministry that for the last very many years, there's so many conversations about digital inclusion and digital divide and digital economy. What seems to happen in Africa many of the times is we seem to focus on the digital and forget about the economy. So, and the way this works, again, as long as you're a net importer of all your solutions, right, you are going to continue to lose value in whatever you implement. And we have to be, and I think you spoke about something around, are we forgetting the many poor people in our countries? And we do agree we have a huge poverty problem. And for very many years, we've been trying to solve poverty by fixing the visible signs of poverty, right? Build more wells, build more this, build more that, which never really works. The true conversation for us as an African state is we need to start creating value where we can, right? So in the digital divide piece, we think that, yes, there's a lot of work happening right now around literacy, digital literacy. The trainings have been done for a very long time. We've had national fiber backbones all over the place. These things have been done across most of Africa, but we're not seeing the upside that's been promised. So the approach is different in saying that if we better appreciate the technology, if we build the right human capital that can start to harness this technology, if we build the right infrastructure to start to see how to utilize some of this technology. I'll give you an example. Uganda we report 800 megawatts excess power every year in our country, right? Now the 800 megawatts excess power, all hydro, right? And the argument then becomes, is our excess power because we are generating a lot, or we have very low productive use? And in truth, it's because we have very low productive use because the grids are not going as far as they should, because the households don't really consume as much. And the conversation then becomes, do we wait for the next 5-10 years to have grid extension to where they need to be? Or do we say that setting up edge cloud nodes wherever it is that we can, and utilizing those provide services might actually work better for us? Some of our colleagues from some other countries, I won't name the names, are coming into Uganda and building all these huge crypto mining farms, right? And let's be honest, there's zero value that stays in the country because they're saying that, yes, we're building a data center, but they really are not, right? They're not paying tax in country because they won't be, So we've taken a very deliberate approach to appreciate, the technologies, and then use that to start solving our own use cases. So back to your question around, do we see this supporting solving the digital divide? So we've seen very huge success in Africa on financial inclusion using, digital mobile phones, right? So this has actually happened. You're seeing, lots of very good AI use cases on credit scoring and starting to actually extend, credit to more rural communities. But can we start to build products that are more valuable, right? So one of the fun things we've done is fund what we call the pathogen economy lab. So the pathogen economy, the word comes from pathogens, and we're saying that there is an economy around pathogens that pharma companies have been making lots of money on for a long time. And around that, we're seeing very strong use cases around diagnostics of some of the local diseases, right? And these are the kind of things that we can start to export to the world. So yes, there's a lot of work being done around bridging the digital divide from an infrastructure perspective, but can we also do it from a human capital perspective that actually are building? One of my most annoying conversations in many of these forums is Africa should become the BPO center of the world, right? So you can provide customer support, that's it. You're not going to be able to build out, products. So yeah, it's just, going back and saying, let's build solutions with these technologies to solve our problems. And if they do it well enough, we can start to export them, maybe not to the West, but across or around Africa, which is a huge market.
That's really interesting, because I think it's a huge chance. I mean, as I said, being in this area for many years, it's now we can see that you're really having an opportunity to making a difference that would overcome this divide that was so obvious. I would like to make a last round and look a little bit ahead of the curve and really understand better what your concerns are and your positive view, of course, on what will happen. We will see regulation. We will see standards. we will see all this coming, and there will be parts of the world who follow them and parts of the world who will not follow them. We will see parts of the world who, without regulation, like I did see this in China and India the other day, offer immediately green AI, and other parts who, have other priorities. Let's start, Adam, you also representing a global firm. How do you deal with this regional difference? I mean, Google globally has a very, very strong commitment, impressive commitment to decarbonization. Do we expect any changes? And do we expect regional differences in the way that you buy and produce your energy? Is that something that you would consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is broader than the sustainability, but absolutely. I mean, around the world, there are different challenges and different opportunities. I spoke through some of the work on clean energy before. We've made great strides in, for example, the US and in Europe. You start to look to parts of APAC, it's much more challenging because there isn't as much availability, clean energy, the regulations and the policies and the incentives are not there. That's a challenge. When we set our goals, we call them moonshots. They're these big ambitions. We expect them to be hard. We like hard challenges at Google. 5 years ago, if we were talking about autonomous vehicles, we think that's a bit of a joke. We now have Waymo vehicles doing hundreds of thousands of autonomous driving trips in the US and starting to come in other parts of the world. So we know we can make progress when we're really focused on it. And we need to pull all the different levers available. So, for example, we've worked with BlackRock and local policymakers to enable 1 gigawatts worth of new solar to go into Taiwan. We have, Google ourselves have invested in 5 gigawatts worth of new clean energy into our supply chain, because again, we see if we don't put some of that stimulus in there, then it's going to be really challenging. So we need to look at, from a Google's perspective, how do we work with policymakers? How can we use the financial strength that we can bring? How do we send the right demand signals? I'll give you another example. In the world of carbon removals, we think carbon removals are key to a net zero future. We have come together to create, along with other businesses, advanced market commitments, one called Frontier Fund, which is focused on technology-based removals, and one called Symbiosis on nature-based removals. And each of those has sort of $1 billion worth of money sitting there. So we've come out and we've said to the market, here's the money, here's the high quality standards that we expect here. If you can meet that demand, then we will invest and we will be able to, drive that market. And that's helping to scale markets. It's also helping to bring down costs, because we're not just trying to solve for Google. We need to help solve for everyone. In fact, just last week, this week, I've completely lost track of time. We've just announced a new deal in Brazil for 200,000 tons worth of nature-based solutions that meet the highest possible standards. So again, how do we work with others? How do we send the demand signals? So there's a lot that needs to be done right around the world, including in Europe, which is where I'm very focused. But it's really through thinking about these new types of technologies, new types of contractual arrangements. We've sort of touched on sort of energy pricing and affordability, which is a huge issue. In the US, we've developed what we call a clean energy transition tariff, which allows us to work directly with utilities so that they can invest in clean energy solutions to meet our 24/7 carbon-free goal without raising the cost for other users. We think that's really important because we don't think others should have to pay for the work that we're doing. So it requires a lot of hard work, a lot of innovation, a lot of partnering with others. But no, those are moonshot goals that we're very much committed to. We're just trying to figure out all those different innovations and ways that we can work to advance right around the world.
Vijay, if you would have a wish list, what would be the number one wish you'd have looking at this whole question of digital AI and green development?
I mean, my top wish would be to work directly with partners like Google, like NVIDIA, and work together to be more efficient, but create a circular economy that can create the reinvestment that's needed into nature. So my background, my grandmother is indigenous from the Amazon, from Ecuador. My father was actually a refugee from Uganda. And I grew up experiencing ancestral wisdom. And for me, it's really the first principle of nature which is you can't grow more without giving back to nature. So that's literally first principle of nature. And for the longest time, technology has been an extractor of nature without completing this circle fully. And so for me, my top wish list would be really to work with partners like Google who are the most sustainable. Thank you, Adam, for all your work. They really are great. I've traveled the world and been meeting several different countries and learning just the deep dive of all of it. And really the work that Google is doing is really outstanding. And to work with them to clean waste, help companies be more efficient, which I think can actually be a win-win-win situation. But the most important win will be the win for the biodiversity and for the indigenous and vulnerable communities, because if we don't take care of them, like I said, it's really losing humanity itself. Once those traditions these are traditions that get passed down verbally, they're not recorded, they're not written. Once they're lost, they will be lost forever. And the AI is actually doing an amazing job with this. People at NVIDIA and others have even saved languages. 2 people left in the world that know a language, and the AI was able to save the language, and that will exist for the rest of time. So I think the AI conversation is a very large one because every industry around the world is going to shift at the same time. So it's a huge responsibility for both public sector and private sector, because it's almost like everyone wants to be in line for the food at the same time, but we all can't. We have to prioritize what's most important, and because we can't shift everything all at once,
Great.
or it's not balanced, and that's another principle of nature. There has to be balance.
I'm actually thrilled to finish this in this wonderful last sentence that you made, but I would like to give David the opportunity to make also one wish, that you would look into this question that we discussed here on the growing demand for energy from the AI field, on infrastructure needs. What would be your wish?
So the right partnerships, right? The right partnerships around, you said it before, know-how and finance. But one other wish I think I'd have is if the development partners actually allowed for a lot more real on the ground solutions development, so that we see more local solutions being developed as opposed to top-down priorities, and also move from output-based reporting and success to more outcome-based, focus. Because I feel like many times we're very short-term in terms of what's expected. So yes, this has been, achieved, tick, and you don't really get to achieve what we can if we place capital the right way in Africa.
Very good. Rana, your wish.
My wish, I love seeing action on the ground. So I think one wish I would have is really more for us to work together on sort of starting up some innovation centers or hubs, in Africa, where actually we really tackle how we bring in solutions relevant also for the continent and support upskilling of youth, particularly from that continent. And I think we have here a great starting point with, a country that's really interested, private sector that's committed, and I think that's something that I would love for us to work towards.
So I was just going to scream, we'll host one. So, and everyone's in the room who decides, so we can have a meeting after this and close it.
I will ask a round of applause in a moment. I would like to thank a great panel. I would love this consensus in the very end that all 4 wishes were related to partnerships. And I will close on a very personal note. Vijay, very impressive pledge for the surrounding here. I had the privilege to fly over the Amazon this morning in a small plane, invited by my friends from Greenpeace. And I have to say, I was very angry when President Lula forced all of us to come here. I've been at 20 COPs, and I thought, not another COP somewhere in the nowhere, but I think it was the right thing to do. I mean, we as I'm a white, old male European. We feel the heat now. It's really, the heat is obviously there, and it really makes something with us. And I think all the argument that we had are right. There are less people here. We have less, corporate players coming, but I still now that was a day where I'm convinced that it was a good thing to come here. And thanks, Vijay, very strong pledge. Thanks to a great panel. Please join me in asking. Thank you.